All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our District Administration web seminar here today, which is entitled Delivering Powerful Reading Growth, How One Florida County Boosted Reading Performance, which is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor here today, iStation. And iStation's mission is to support educators, empower kids, and change lives. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items, and then we'll get right on to the presentation. If at any time here today you need any technical support, please just use the chat panel, which you can find. It's on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and then select on my name, which is host or Stephen Blackburn, and then type your message in, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can and get that problem fixed for you. I'm also about to submit a phone number and access code in the chat that you can dial in if you want to listen in privately or if you don't have any speakers. So look out for that as well. We will also be welcoming any questions that you have today with a Q&A session that will be happening at the end of the presentation. You can submit a question at any time throughout the webinar by using the Q&A panel, which you can find. It's on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Then send all your questions to all panelists and we'll get to them at the end. If you currently don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, look again, right side of your screen, and click on the expand triangle, and that will show if you have access to it. Also, the last thing I'd like to note is that if you would like to access this web seminar at a later time, you'll be pleased to know that everyone who's registered and all of you who are attending here today, all of you will receive an email with a link to the slides, as well as an archive recording. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers we have with us today. We have Michael Feeney, who is the Executive Director of Elementary Education at Pinellas County Schools. And we have Julie Kalinowski, who is the Strategy Consultant at iStation. And also, I'd also like to say, we have Faith Conti from iStation, who will be moderating the Q&A at the end. So hi, Julie, all of you. Great to have you with us today. This is really great.
Thank you so much. Mike, thank you for being here. I don't really have enough words in my lexicon to describe how honored I am to introduce Mike Feeney to all of you. Besides being the Executive Director for Elementary Schools in Pinellas, he's navigated a really successful career from the classroom now to a district administrator. You can see some things here on the slide, but also not to forget your support and service as a Navy veteran. So thank you for your service. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to just talking about your district a wee bit here, Mike. So if you could just share a little bit about Pinellas as a school system, but also sharing how how you have performed coming in and out, and then again out of COVID, and just maybe talking about a couple of things that really impact and matter to Pinellas.
Well, thanks, Julie. And I guess that is always the question, right? Before COVID, after COVID, and it seems like a lifetime ago. But one of the things that we're most proud about here at Pinellas is our graduation rate. And one of the things that you oftentimes don't hear elementary talking about is graduation rate. But here in Pinellas, we really the graduation rate begins in VPK kindergarten, and it is one of those goals that we all celebrate because we're all held accountable to that. For our students to be successful, they have to be successful in elementary school first. So we are really proud of our graduation rate. As you see, we rank the highest among the 10 largest districts in the state of Florida, which is something that we're very proud of. And we focus a lot on that. And we have a great group of teachers, a great group of administrators that support this work. And you can see a lot of the stats here, on the screen. But for us, it's really about, supporting teachers, ensuring that they have the resources to be most successful with students.
Absolutely. And, one thing, as we've worked together for such a long time, I know Pinellas is committed to growing greatness, in each and every child. And I know that focusing on the individual student is something that really matters and that you're passionate about. So with Pinellas being such a large school system, how is it that you ensure you're sticking with your mission of individualizing instruction for each student.
Well, I think, with that point, we recognize that each student is different and each student is unique and has a different path to move towards grade level, towards success. And so we really want to look for content, curriculum, professional development that differentiates at the same time as adapts. And I think that's what led to the partnership that we have with you at iStation, is that we saw the success and we saw the benefit of a program and its ability to adapt to meet individual student needs, which I know we're going to talk a little bit later on about during the presentation.
Absolutely. That is one thing that we pride ourselves on as well. And talking about priding ourselves, I know that one of our points of pride at iStation was how you, during your career at High Point Elementary as the principal there, was how you successfully implemented iStation. You've been a partner for many years, but I would love for you to tell the story and take us back a wee bit to tell us what this picture means to you and just how that implementation and how you were able to grow, that elementary school from a D to a B school in 1 year. And I know that, iStation is part of that, but it's not the entire picture. So just to share with our audience and attendees today, just how you were able to do those things.
So yeah, that picture always makes me smile. That is it was our ELA coach, but from time to time she transformed herself into the iStation fairy. And so she went around, as we all did, really encouraging each student, getting to know each student, setting goals with each student, encouraging them. And that's what I think led to the success if you talk about High Point. It was the intentionality behind each and everything that we did. It was between supporting teachers and meeting students' needs where they were. One of the areas of focus for us was, whether it was the principals or the coaches at that school, is our role was to support teachers and support students and really ensure that they had all the resources that they needed. And iStation was one of those resources that allowed them to identify individual students' needs and then differentiate based on that.
Absolutely. It's also, you had talked about creating that culture around, data-driven instruction. I know that's something that's important to your team. And I would be remiss not to have a shout out to Cherie Marsh and to Holly Potter that we work closely with as well. I know that this is something that really is near and dear to their hearts as well. And so, as I was looking at developing content for today's session with you, I really looked at through the lens of data-driven instruction and how this 6-step process, 5 of them being that problem-solving process, right? Identifying, analyzing, planning, setting goals, measuring and monitoring, but also the partnership. So, as we look through the lens of this, really looking at that transformation that you had with High Point, then coming into your career now at the district level and kind of being over 78 elementary schools, I know that you have high expectations, and I know that data is really important to you. Do you want to expand a little bit on how you use some of the iStation data?
Sure. And so, the key part of, that problem solving piece is the partnership that we have with the team at iStation. Between that collaboration with your team, you mentioned, Cherie, Holly, we have some phenomenal people here who are also, doing the work in supporting the teachers. And so, we look at this as a resource that we truly believe in and that we know that our teachers believe in. So because of that, we provide lots of professional development. Cherie, who is one of our staff developers, provides professional development to any and all teachers. The partnership with iStation, we do, or you do actually, professional development for all teachers. And so when we talk about all teachers, we're talking about 400 teachers per grade level, K through 5. And we have 2 times a year that we do a district-wide training where they receive professional development. One of the offerings for them, of course, is iStation. And that's differentiated because over the years, our teachers have, even though we've had this program for I'm not sure, Julie, maybe the exact number of years, But even though we've had this, we have new teachers, and so we differentiate that support. It's important for us as we move through different roles to also look at the data, measure it and monitor it. I know we're going to talk about the usage later on, as we go through this. But we look at those reports every week, and we share those with administrators, and we share those with district staff, and support teachers to ensure that they have the resources that they need to meet those goals. And then what does that data tell them? And again, we're going to jump into this later on, so I don't want to talk too much about the slides that are coming.
Yeah.
But it can go from there.
Excellent. So, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all wanting the same thing. We're wanting student success and improve student outcomes. So really, with that lens of the data-driven instruction and the partnership, I really do feel like our partnership's wonderful, but I do believe that we at iStation really strive to be a part of that problem-solving process for districts. And one thing, that first step is identifying, and for identifying, you need data collection, right? So you're going to need universal screening, you're going to need progress monitoring, you're going to need formative assessments, really the need for actual data for every level of stakeholder, right? So you had mentioned a little bit earlier, which is, at that every level of stakeholder, how do you, as such a large district, share the data from the top down?
Yep. And so we collaborate with you and your team, who shares data with us every week as far as usage data, by school, by classroom, or actually by school, by grade, and even by teacher. We share that with our district leadership team to show where we are, school-wide. And then we share that also with principals, assistant principals. We share that with instructional coaches, and then that also gets shared with teachers. One of the things that you talked about on the last slide, we also use this as part of our MTSS process. And we look at, the ISIP as an option, and maybe you're going to talk about the ISIP a little bit more as we go through this. But we look at this as an opportunity to see where the students are each month in progress monitor, but then give that on-demand assessment, bi-weekly, and really focus to monitor how students are moving along a continuum and ensure their success and that they're getting the right supports.
Absolutely. And, just as important as the data collection piece, to me, even more important is how we are disaggregating the data back and making it accessible for the educator and looking at it through a lens that makes sense to the educator. So, I know when we first started our partnership and when iStation first started giving data back to educators, we looked through the lens of tiers, right? And we, through the years and through feedback and just through looking to see how data, if used correctly, could make an impact on student outcomes, we worked with various partnerships on looking at it through the lens of quintiles, right? And so you were one of those districts that shifted from that traditional view of looking at it through tiers, right? Looking at it through the quintiles. And, we've heard feedback across the country about how that's really allowed districts and educators to be more intentional with all of their students. But can you share a little bit of insight on how that changed your view and your educators' view on how to look at data and use it to drive instruction?
Well, I think one of the things that we heard from our educators was when we looked at the tiers, we had that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which you see on the left side of that triangle. But when we moved to quintiles, there's a wide range of learning abilities in that level 3, 4, and 5. And that really allowed teachers to differentiate what we at one time considered, the 41st percentile, which was on or above grade level, but it really allowed them to differentiate. So this became not just an intervention, it became an enrichment as well. So how do I support my highest learners, as well as how do I support my students who are proficient, but maybe need some of their, gaps addressed and different strategies. So moving to quintiles allowed teachers really to look at their students more individually and ensure that they're getting that differentiated instruction that we talked about before.
Absolutely. And, we've really heard some great feedback about looking at it through that lens. Again, through collecting data and giving it back, because we're a technology company, we're able to respond to customer needs. We're constantly looking at ways to make it easier for the educator and for, administrators to be able to really use this data for recommendation for what they're going to do. And so, for those of you on the call, any attendees that are currently using iStation, you probably noticed our new homepage and how we display our data. And for those of you that don't know, we are, again, making these reports available at all levels. I know that with our new reporting functionality and our view, you were a major and integral part of our feedback from our educator community on how should the data look, right? How can we display it in a way that makes it more actionable? And so, again, just wanted to thank you for that. And also just wanted to talk about the different levels of data. So, we share usage information with you. We share various reports with you. We do beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year reviews, but really the types of reporting we have fall into really reporting to track growth and then reporting to inform instruction, because again, data at the end of the day provides insight, which leads to, opportunity for growth. So you had mentioned your MTSS process and how collectively, you're looking at these data. One thing I love about Pinellas and what they do is the kind of competition or competitiveness amongst the regions that you have, because you're transparent with your data. And I think you've built such a wonderful data culture at the district that it's never about pointing fingers about, you didn't do this or I'm not doing as well as you. It's about growth. And so can you share a little bit about how you share those data amongst regions and area superintendents?
So you took the words from me when you said data culture. Is that I think one of the things that we've moved to is truly having a culture of data where our data is transparent. So with our data, I share weekly with our area superintendents, and as I communicate with them, I share who is above expectations, or and we create that healthy competition, but we also celebrate schools. We celebrate schools that are meeting their expected usage, and I know that is coming up. But when we talk about this MTSS, this really is a good way for us to, you see the graphs down below, you see overall reading, text fluency, reading comprehension. But it's a good way for us as we're tracking specific areas to have that consistent progress monitoring. We have progress monitoring with the ISIP and the on-demand assessment every 2 weeks. So it really allows the teacher to inform that instruction. But, like I said, creating the buy-in with the area superintendents and sharing the data with them of their area schools. Each of them have anywhere from 15 to 20 schools. So allowing them to see where they are, and then they celebrate their principals individually as well, because we're always looking for who's doing this really well, and then learn from them, and then try to support those who maybe need additional supports.
Absolutely. I always think that the purpose of data is to be able to adjust if needed, and also to celebrate successes and continue that path if it's working, or be able to adjust quickly if it's not, right? So I agree with you. Another piece you had mentioned, going back to the whole differentiation in the individualized student pathways, is really, I think, part of what spoke to you and to Pinellas was the fact that our universal screener and progress monitoring tool, ISIP, really seamlessly connects with our adaptive instruction, the online adaptive instruction, because it does individualize for the student, right? So part of that plan is, once you've looked at those data and you're able to say, okay, there's weaknesses here, knowing that that's taken into account as students are placed into the instruction, whether it be for intervention purposes or even for maintenance of on grade level content, or acceleration for students that may be needing some more enrichment. It really is looking at resources. Are they research based? Are they addressing the needs identified? Are they supporting whole group and core instruction, and really being able to use them for targeted small group instruction? So one thing Holly had shared with us early on this year, and even towards the end of last year, was, hey, we need to kind of step away from just looking at iStation or other tools that we have as remediation tools, because that's not what they are. They can be used in some ways for that. They can fill in some gaps, but we need, because of the COVID learning loss, we need to move towards this acceleration framework culture. And so we spend a lot of time working with you and Holly, and with the sharing of your teacher playbook on how to utilize resources for those things, right? And I think one thing that Spoken Please Speak Up is really the content that is given from iStation, and the lesson format is best practices in any type of supporting students, right? It's explicit, it's systematic. There's that just-in-time scaffolding. There's corrective feedback and those instructional routines for students. So that's one thing I feel that spoke to you as you were evaluating different programs and needs.
So Julie, if you can just back up one slide, one of the things that, we really liked about this is that, and I say this being iStation, one of the things we really like about iStation is that it has everything. It's not just for our, tier 3 students, but it really is for every student across every quintile. And you have the supports that the teachers need, so they don't need to go looking for something for their tier 3 students. And now how am I going to enrich, and use a different program for that? So iStation provides all that, both for the students and the teachers. It really has those interactive lessons. And then it has the scaffolds to move students to grade level. And so that's the thing that's exciting for us, is that, teachers have a hard job as it is. And if they have all these different resources that they have to go try to find for their 18, 22, 25 students, that makes it even more challenging. So iStation has everything right there for them, whether they are, a tier, or whether in the bottom quintile or the top quintile.
Exactly. And I love that you use it that way. And this is kind of the magic piece right here that, Mike, I don't think I've worked with another district that is so focused on fidelity of implementation as you all are. And part of that fidelity of implementation is we have recommendations of usage around research that we've conducted with Johns Hopkins and various other research institutions. And what we found is that if we look at the quintiles and we look at where that needle starts to move, we look at levels 1 and 2 being students below the 41st percentile, using the program for about 40 minutes and up a week. For levels 3 through 5, looking at using it for 30 plus minutes a week. And that's something that has been really important to you. I will share some data as we go through on specifically Pinellas data and how the usage impacted growth. But if you wanted to share the reasoning of why, you're so focused on the usage recommendations, that would be awesome.
So I think that goes back, Julie, to when I was a principal. I've seen firsthand that when you have the intentionality, and you mentioned usage of fidelity, when you use the program with fidelity, we know that the program works. We have, experience, and we've seen that. And so because of that, it's one of those things that we do monitor because we believe in it, and we know that when it's used correctly with fidelity, that we have the results that you're talking about. We do get the results, from our core instruction, and then this, supporting the differentiation work that we're trying to do.
Absolutely, and it's evident. It's evident in your data. It's evident, just across the table. You mentioned earlier just iStation being able to be used for multiple levels of instructional support, all the way from level 1 to level 5 within those quintiles. And I think if you don't know about iStation, or if you do know about iStation, oftentimes people look at it as just an adaptive computer program, but it's so much more, right? You all are doing a phenomenal job of utilizing the teacher-directed lessons for small group instruction. And the beauty of that, especially now with teacher shortages, and is being able to have resources that are evidence-based, that are searchable by standard, that are aligned to standards, and they're fully scripted. So They could be for brand new teachers. And we know that that science of reading, that research that we know that we are based on, is being implemented by these resources, as well as the digital teacher resources that we have, where teachers can, teach to whole group. They can teach to a small group. They can make assignments based on skills and standards. So you've all done a really nice job of utilizing all of the features, I feel, that make iStation what it is. Anything on there?
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, I do, the resources available to teachers, are amazing. And the teaching profession is a hard profession. And so when and we've identified what a student need is, but now where's the resource? So the resource is right there in iStation. And teachers have lessons to support them. So whether you're a first-year teacher or a 30-year teacher, those lessons are research-based lessons that we know are going to address, the concept or the standard.
Absolutely. One really important step is the setting goals, right? You had mentioned earlier about having a culture of high expectations and accountability around data. And we've spoken about this multiple times, is that we know that when students themselves really understand their data and use their data and become active agents in their own learning, they grow tremendously. And there's research out there by Marzano about how many percentile points they can grow. But really it is about active agents in their own growth. And I know that you all focus a lot on goal setting and so forth. You want to share a little bit about how you do that with your peers?
So I think it's important for students to know exactly where they are, as well as what their target is at the end of the year. But then more importantly is, how am I going to get there? Because we can set goals without action plans. And so sharing with students what their action plan is and how they're going to get to what their goal is. You mentioned us monitoring student usage. The students monitor their own usage. You walk into our classrooms and you'll see graphs. And at the end of every day, students graph how many minutes they have. And so if they know that their goal is 30 minutes or 40 minutes, and that's going to get them to what their end goal is, but they take that accountability themselves, and they take that responsibility on themselves. And so as principals walk classrooms, they can go and have conversations with individual students and celebrate their growth, or motivate students to make sure that they're meeting their goals by Friday. And so having students take that ownership and taking it off the teachers, but putting it on the students, is a key to success for sure.
Absolutely. And one thing we've done through professional services and professional learning with Pinellas and other districts across the nation is really talking about setting those goals so that they're measurable, but also that that we have high expectations, because there are data and there's research out there that focuses on, hey, regardless of a student's socioeconomic background, regardless of that type of status, that if they have targeted interventions and really strong core instruction in place, that they can grow, right? They can close that gap. So really it's about having these high expectations. And I love how you do that in Pinellas, of really letting students take ownership of their learning as well. That last step in the problem solving process is the measuring and monitoring, which to me is crucial, because again, data is important, and teaching is reflective practice. And so if you look at things like, documentation of interventions, and you're focusing on targeted skills, which is a lot of what Pinellas does, and then going back in to isolate that skill that you've been intervening in to see that type of growth. That's one thing you all do extremely well. Cherie, is adamant about, the way ISIP's designed is they get assessed monthly. That's the choice of Pinellas and how they use us. But, and then at that mid-month point, they've gone in, they've intervened with iStation resources, other resources that you have. They've gone in and done an on-demand assessment. So then they can see, is the assessment working? And again, if it's not, what do I need to do to adjust it? And if it is, then I remember to do what I'm doing again. So you want to share a little bit about how utilizing those on-demands was something that you as a district chose to move forward utilizing?
I think the on-demand assessments give us what we all want. It gives us that constant progress monitoring to make instructional decisions to see if what I'm doing with this child is really making a difference and if it's closing that gap. And so one of the things that you have right here is, a letter knowledge graph. And so we see where the student was in September, and we see where they ended at May. But we look at that progression line to say, is this support that whether it's an intervention or enrichment, whatever it is this going to close that gap, and is it going to move them to grade level? Because we don't want them to just, maintain where they currently are. We want to get them to grade level. And so we use this information to inform decisions, and we've seen this work. And again, I go back to when I was a principal, we used the on-demand assessments, on a regular basis to inform our instruction, to inform who's supporting students, what supports they're getting, and just to make instructional decisions. And sometimes, we made decisions to change interventions because we saw that line wasn't moving them fast enough towards grade level.
Exactly. Another thing to point out, this just made me think of something was, oftentimes as teachers, you see a lot of red, you see a lot of yellow, and you become discouraged. Yes, ultimately we want to close that gap, and we know we need to grow these students quickly. But to be able to see growth even within a certain level is rewarding, right? So yes, we didn't close the gap in a year, but we did see progress. And that's one thing that I always work with educators on is, hey, any growth is great, right? And we need to celebrate all growth, and for students as well, because these kids that are struggling know they're struggling, but we need to celebrate when they do grow. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the usage. I was able to pull some data from last year, and what I did was I took those usage recommendations, I looked at the 30-minute threshold, and I was able to go in and look at all students and look to see for those students that use the program less than 30 minutes a week, and then the students that used it for 30 plus minutes weekly across the academic school year, where their average beginning of the year percentile rank was and where it ended. So if you look at here on this table, on the left-hand side, you'll see the average beginning of the year percentile rank for kindergarten. On the left-hand side, those that used it less than 30 minutes. On the right-hand side, those that use it 30 plus minutes. And then in the gray, the bar graph right next to it, you'll see the average end of year percentile rank. And just as a reminder, ISIP is a norm reference universal screener and progress monitoring tool. So we are not looking to see how our students doing just in iStation. We're looking to see how our students doing across the board with all literacy instruction. And so, iStation is a piece of this puzzle, but it also speaks to other things you're doing, in the classroom. So if you, for this one, you can see, for example, how there was growth for that group of students that used it with Fidelity. And it goes back to your conversation of Fidelity, right? Of usage for any program.
And I also think that, if we look at the bar graphs on the right that went from 38th to 40th percentile, we would also celebrate if it was 38th to 38th, right? Because we're talking about beginning of the year, end of the year, and it's a norm reference assessment. And so it also, a year's worth of growth is students staying at that 38th percentile. And so when we do look at, like a graph like this, we see that students who didn't engage with this, again, there's other factors involved, but those students didn't make a year's worth of growth. And so we're already creating that gap in kindergarten where those who did were, exceeding that, and we're making at least, if not more, than a year's worth of growth.
Yeah, and that's, evident. Kindergarten seemed to be a little bit of an anomaly with the data, but, for first grade, both groups grew. I would like to say the group that used it with Fidelity grew at a faster pace, right? But again, to me, this does speak to Fidelity of implementation. So first grade, both groups grew nicely. Second grade, again, there was a decline in those that didn't meet the expectations of usage for iStation amongst other tools. But the group that did, like you said, they went from the 50th to the 51st, which they grew, but just maintaining is growth in itself. So.
No, agreed. And again, I mean, we'll always celebrate whether it's, if you go, sorry, Julie, if you go back one slide. But, when you look at this, 50th versus 41st or 50th versus 51st, again, that's more than a year's, it's at least a year's worth of growth. And, I think we would all celebrate that. And so, those are I said that in the kindergarten slide, but, we want to see students making at least a year's worth of growth. And then, when we're talking about like those on-demand assessments or progress monitoring, we want to make more than a year's worth of growth to move them towards grade level.
Absolutely. Third grade as well. There was a year's worth of growth on the left-hand side, and then we saw, a faster, an increased pace of growth, for those that use it with Fidelity. And again, I know what the research says about iStation. This is evident of what it says as a piece of your puzzle of what you're doing in Pinellas. And I think that goes back to just, again, the partnership that we have. One thing you talked about that district-wide training that we do twice a year in Pinellas. For anybody on the call from a district that wants a great model, I would definitely reach out to Pinellas because they do it extremely well. But it is about services and professional learning. It's about taking what we know works for a district your size or a smaller district. It's more about customizing it based on how you do professional learning. One thing we talked about at the beginning of this year or the end of last year, I can't remember, was, hey, we have these district-wide trainings, but we also know that those isolated events aren't enough, right? So one thing that you shared with us was this concept of tiny topics, which we have fallen in love with at iStation, and we're wanting to implement that across different districts. Our lead professional learning consultant there, Jenny Paris, is doing a phenomenal job with those. But if you want to share a little bit about how you came up with that concept of tiny topics and how it works, to share your knowledge with others.
No, I think it's great. And as we said in the beginning, there's a team here. It's not just me. There's Holly and Sheree, and oftentimes they're the ones who have these ideas. So I do give them credit on a lot of this. We had that, the district-wide professional development where we train all of our teachers 2 times a year. And then we also have, times that we are at PLCs and providing professional development. But how do we also ensure that what's relevant or timely at this moment is what teachers need? And so I think that's where, within the collaboration in this partnership, we came up with tiny topics. And it really is, it's a 15-minute professional development. It is virtual to allow teachers to, receive professional development on a certain topic. And then 15 minutes question answers where they have the experts from iStation, they have Sheree there, they have others who can, answer questions that they have and provide supports. And it was really a way to meet the individual teachers' needs, because as I mentioned to you, we've been a partner for a long time with you. And so we have teachers who are very comfortable with iStation, and then we have teachers who are just learning because it's their first year. And tiny topics allows us to differentiate and meet the needs of all of our teachers.
So, it's great that we're differentiating for students, but we also all have to differentiate for the educator as well, right? So, in our partnership, we talked throughout this entire presentation about committing to cultivating a data culture that really drives that systemic improvement, right? So those are done through our leadership meetings that we have with you all, every 2 weeks, through data that we pull for schools and that district-wide ongoing sustainable PD, including the tiny topics, and also project management. Faith Conti, who's going to be doing the Q&A in the background here in a minute, she has really driven that for Pinellas in the partnership, and I think that has really had a major impact on the student outcomes and the educator, them feeling heard. And at the end of the day, we all have a heart for education. We're all in it for the money. I'm just joking. We're all in it for the right reasons. We're all in it for student success, right? So, but the heart's not enough. It's really about taking that process that we talked about, that problem-solving process, and a really strong collaborative partnership to really impact what matters the most, which is our kiddos, right? And I just want to thank you, Mike. You are such a strong leader. You have an amazing team of people. And it's really always a pleasure to get to work with you. And I hope that this is a partnership that will keep going for years to come. So thank you for your time today.
Julia, I definitely appreciate that. I just want to say that the partnership is probably one of the most valuable pieces of this, is that we really see you as a think partner, and we know that we can collaborate with you and just kind of talk things through at any point and problem solve. And the partnership is phenomenal, but it's only benefiting the students and the teachers. So thank you.
I appreciate it. And Stephen, I'm going to turn it back to you.
All right, perfect. Thank you. That was a great presentation. We appreciate it, Julie and Michael. So now, as they were saying, now we've come to the audience Q&A portion of our webinar, where you can now send in your questions. And so Julie or Michael, they can answer your questions live on the air. If you haven't already, you can send in your questions in writing, and you can do that by accessing the Q&A panel that we have right there. It's on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. It's the option next to the chat button. If you can't see it, there should be 3 dots next to the chat button. Click on that, and that should bring you to the Q&A panel. All right, and with that, I'll now pass things off to Faith over at iStation, who will be moderating the Q&A.
Thank you, Stephen. And of course, thank you, Julie and Mike. We do work closely together already. I would say to you that we have individuals that are certainly interested in your slides, Julie. And for those that are listening that may not have already asked, of course, we can get a copy of these slides out to you. I am coming from an angle because I do have a direct connection with both of you working intimately on this account, which is a privilege. I have some follow-up questions. Julie, and this is really both for you and Mike. I think that this is interesting when you talked about training your teachers, meeting them where they're at with this level of professional development. You have the district wide, you have these tiny topics. I think what I really want to do, it's not necessarily even a question, is just mention to the audience that what we're really good at collectively as a team, the administration with Pinellas and our team, is we also get that feedback. Mike is in charge of over, Mike, 4,000 educators? I don't know the number now anymore, at your district. And it's hard to know what they're all thinking on any given day. We have a good pulse, right, from your administration. We feed that up. But they do afford us to have the ability to really hear what they're needing. They come into those tiny topics and they give us amazing feedback. They're appreciative of that thoughtful, very tightly focused, short, training on something really relevant that they're going to be able to take away and go and put into application. And it also gives them that chance to say, hey, we also need this. I'm really curious about how to utilize this particular component of the program, to your point, to keep meeting the needs of these students. Could you talk a little bit about shifting gears, about the triangulation of data that goes on in your district and how iStation is included in that, and what those data conferences look like when Julie and the data consultants are coming in at your district and having those working lunches? What's going on in those meetings?
So I think, Faith, those conversations really are twofold. They're collaborative. They allow us to share our thoughts with you, but also for you kind of to inform us as to what you're seeing from an outside perspective. Sometimes we're so close to the data that we stop seeing certain things. And so when we have those collaborative data meetings, it's really an opportunity for us to hear trends that you see that maybe we're not seeing, and for us to problem solve around those. And then how are we going to, either support schools, support teachers to, further close gaps or address like that. But I do think it's valuable for us to be able to have those and have those opportunities to really see where we are, where we need to go. Because again, sometimes we're looking at bi-weekly, monthly data, and it's good for us to take a step back and reflect where we need to go or where we've gone.
Yeah, those are really powerful meetings. Those are, and we level set, right? And then we adjust accordingly. And those have been super beneficial. I have another question as well, and it relates to something, Julie, the importance of working with the Hollies of the districts where they're sharing, I guess you could say their year-to glances or their playbooks and their plans, their district developed plans with us so that we can make sure that we're in alignment what that looks like.
Absolutely. You know, Faith, I think ultimately when we have a partnership, we meet way before the implementation even begins, right? So we look at what the desired outcomes are of that specific district or partner, and we plan backwards. It's like backwards planning. So we look at what the outcomes that you want to measure are, what your plan is for getting there, and then how we can fit in professional services and partnership throughout that. And it looks different for every district. I will tell you, it's not ever the same. It's very unique and customized. And so, again, I think it is by working collaboratively and knowing what your outcomes are. That's what allows us to build a plan that is ongoing and sustainable.
Thank you, Julie. Mike, this one's for you. Mr. Feeney, can you talk to how, this was in the chat, which was really great to the panelists. Thank you for transferring that question over. Can you speak to how you were able to get that buy-in from all the stakeholders to become such a data-driven district, a data-driven district? Certainly you coming out of that successful experience from your experience at High Point and how you did that at the district level.
So I think that as educators, we have to see the value of whatever it is we're using. We need to see the results. And I think that's one of the things that we've been able to do. We've been very transparent. For me, you know, I lived this. But again, I was coming from another school to this school, and where, you know, we implemented this with greater fidelity at High Point, and we really ensured that that teachers saw the value of the product that was in front of them. And we were very just transparent with the data and how we were going to use that to allow us to grow. And then as I've moved into this district position, again, it's just being transparent, it's being honest, it's allowing you know, teachers or administrators to be able to see the benefits and see the student growth behind this. And that's one of the things that we've really done is we continually share data so that it is relevant and it's transparent and it's right there in front of them.
Well, thank you. I know that we've been in some of those meetings where we've seen some of those schools who have earned they've earned that trust of you, and then they've really dialed in. And to your point, all programs, and we've sat in those meetings and shared how well they have performed and how much growth they've seen. We come into those meetings saying, hey, let's pull that school, let's see, because we know that all the right things are occurring. And so it's been a delight to be a part of. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Julie, that's all I have or seen. Everything else is more operational, where we can get, actually, there's another question that just came in. This is great. Mike, where do you recommend for districts to start in creating these systems to implement with Fidelity?
So I think with anything, if you're going to implement iStation as your district, I mean, obviously it depends on how large your district is and what your plan for rollout is. But I think first and foremost, the administrators need to see the value of the product, and they need to be educated themselves. If you have coaches, they need to be, on board and brought up to speed, and then support teachers. And I think sometimes, again, depending on the size of the district, sometimes we roll things out too fast without the right supports. And so teachers, schools, administrators have to be supported through any kind of implementation of anything. And I'm happy to be, to talk through with anybody who wants to implement this. And I'll make myself available, but you can contact, I'm sure, Julie or iStation, and they'll put us in touch.
Absolutely.
There is another question here. This is a great one, actually, and we've talked about this before in the past, so I'm glad it came up. It says, has this helped in lieu of the pandemic? What trends do you see since there is a teacher shortage? So we're combining two things there.
So it sounds like two questions. So has this helped in lieu of the pandemic? Absolutely. When we look at our data, we celebrated this year, and not everybody can say that. When we look at, say, for example, third, fourth, and fifth, we're talking about elementary. All of our grade levels increased or stayed the same where they were, during the pandemic. And so many schools had what we called a COVID slide, but because of that intentionality, because of the supports, we've used iStation as a way to, even during remote learning, students were still engaged with their iStation usage. And so we were really excited when we got our results back that we showed increases in all of our grade levels. So that was great. What trends you see in regards to teacher shortage, I think was your second question.
Yeah.
I think that, across the nation, we're faced with teacher shortages right now. We're continuing to, support teachers as much as we can. I think that's one of the most important things, as we address the teacher shortage, is that we have to support teachers and make sure that they have all the resources that they need. And iStation is just one of the ways that we do this. There's, like I said, we mentioned before that there's lessons, to support students, whether they're in the lowest quintile or the highest quintile. And so having those teacher supported lessons are really important, and just supporting teachers during this time. And then, I know, Julie, on one of your slides, you even said that because these lessons are scripted, that we could have substitutes using these from time to time. And so, but yeah, so supporting teachers is probably one of the most important things for us. And, I think we're all faced with a teacher shortage across the nation, but we're fortunate where we are right now.
Absolutely. Mike, again, thank you so much for your time. And for those of you, in attendance that aren't familiar with iStation, we would love the opportunity to hear from you, for you to experience iStation for yourself. So if that's something that interests you, go ahead and put your email address in the chat, and we'll make sure to get more information out to you. For those of you that are using iStation and may want to get to a deeper level of partnership that we have with Pinellas, we want to serve you. So please reach out to your account executive or your support personnel. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat, so that way you can put your information if that's something you want to go to. But again, it's really been a pleasure, Mike. You are truly an amazing leader, along with the rest of the team. And I just really do thank you for your time. I know how busy you are. So
Thank you, Julie.
All right, perfect. So we're now out of time for the Q&A. That said, as I go through some of my closing slides in just a few moments, please feel free to continue submitting any of your questions, if any come to mind, and I'll make sure they're sent over to iStation so they can be answered at some point in the future. But yeah, so first off, thank you again, Julie, Michael, and of course, thank you to iStation. And to you, our audience, I would also like to thank you for joining us today as well. For those of you who particularly enjoyed what you saw, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by us here at District Administration, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, and current issues in K through 12. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to DA, and they stay up to date with us in our print magazine, online, in our newsletters, and web seminars like this one. Also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe that what you saw would be helpful to your colleagues, which I'm sure is the case, you'll be pleased to know that our team at DA, we will be sending you an email later tomorrow with an on-demand recording of this web seminar and a link to the slides. So with that, on behalf of DA, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone. Take care, be well, and stay safe. Thank you very much, everyone.
thank you.